All right, is there anybody that's going to own up to going to see the Barbie movie over the weekend? It was interesting. I was actually looking at a map. Cable News put up a map of all the states. They're making a big deal of Barbenheimer. Barbie movie, Oppenheimer movie, Barbenheimer. That was apparently the meme going around heading into the weekend. I'm not a huge movie buff, folks. My name is Chris Stigall, by the way. Vince is out today. He'll be back tomorrow. I got called in to Phil. Happy to be here. This is like my home away from home. I do a morning show down the street in Philadelphia, but always happy to jump in the saddle for Vince when I get the call. The number remains the same, and I would love to hear from you. I actually kind of wanted you to be an armchair movie critic because I don't get out much. I'm kind of a shut-in. 888-630-9625, 888-630 WMAL. No, actually, I wanted to go see Oppenheimer after church yesterday, and I couldn't get in because the theater was so slammed. But the media has been doing backflips this morning and all throughout the day about how well the Barbie movie did. And I am really curious to know if, in fact, your review of that film, if you saw it, if you're willing to call and say, yeah, I went. I don't blame you, by the way. Like, I'm not mad at you. What I noticed was there was an interesting fight amongst conservatives on social media over this movie. And that kind of piqued my interest a bit over the weekend. I saw some conservatives were saying, no, it's a man-hating, man-bashing film. I'll never go see it. It's propaganda. And then I saw other conservatives saying, would you just settle down and quit trying to find offense in everything and just understand it's a pop culture thing and it's just something fun that people just want to have fun with? Lighten up, Francis. It's just a movie. Quit being so ridiculous and prickly about everything. Now, look, I am sensitive to the latter. You know as well as I do that sometimes, certainly the left goes hysterical about every stupid thing. But it would be less than honest if I said that we don't have that on the conservative side. Our side does tend to freak out and find problem or offense in everything. And I do get exhausted with that because there is plenty to object to culturally without going and seeking it out or manufacturing it out of whole cloth. Now, having said all that, I kind of fall into the Rush Limbaugh tradition. If everybody is saying the same thing, I tend to pump the brakes and say, this doesn't feel quite right. And all I heard all weekend long and into today was how successful Barbie was, how great Barbie was, what a blockbuster Barbie was. And what's interesting is they're making a lot about the fact that it was a women's empowerment film and that a woman directed it and it was the single biggest box office take for a woman director ever. And I thought to myself, wait a minute. I didn't know we were celebrating women and individualism with women anymore. I didn't know women could do big things. I didn't know women even mattered anymore. I thought the best women were men. Since when did we start celebrating womanhood again? I was very confused by all of this. So this celebration of the success of a woman director is a little strange for me, and I'm actually very excited for the first man who calls himself a woman to direct a film and does better than this woman so that he can take the rightful place as the best-selling woman director as a man, you know, and put it rightfully back into the win column for we men. Because again, as I said, the left has been telling us the best women are men. So, number one, I'm very confused. Number two, if everybody is gushing and gushing and gushing about this Barbie movie, that tells me there's got to be something about it, culturally, that media is celebrating and they want us to see. Now, I didn't see it. My 17-year-old son did see it. Over the weekend, he was with a group of friends, boys and girls. And, you know, when you're a 17-year-old boy, you remember, fellas, you'll do whatever girls want to do if it means maybe you can get a date out of it or whatever you want to say. So he's with this mixed group of kids, and they're trying to decide what to do. And the girls say, let's go see the Barbie movie. And he says, okay, I'll go. So he goes along. And I asked him, I said, okay, tell me, how was it? Now, this is a 17-year-old kid he's a smart kid. And I've certainly his mother and I have done our best to raise him with values, and he's got a great work ethic. He's a great student. He's a Christian. He's a conservative. But he's the opposite of what I was just talking about. He's not out looking to be offended. He's still a 17-year-old kid in 2023, and he's aware of the culture around him. So he's not running around, spraying the cultural fire hydrant on every fire he sees. I said, so what'd you think of the Barbie movie? And he goes, you know what? There were parts of it that were funny. But this was what he said unsolicited, and he doesn't offer up cultural criticisms ever. It's just not the way he talks. He doesn't think that deeply about that stuff, really. At least not that he shares with me. And he says, yeah, there were some funny parts. And he said, I guess I can appreciate the message for girls and women. He said, but it's just, it was full of man bashing. That was his perspective. My 17-year-old son's interpretation of this movie was it was hostile to men. Now, that's a 17-year-old kid's impression. You may disagree with it if you saw it, but that's his. He said also that his film, the movie theater he was in, happened to be full of women and gay guys. He said, so the majority of the film was a lot of women hooting and yelling and gay guys catcalling and hooting and yelling. I don't know, maybe over Ryan Gosling, who played Ken. I don't know. So my son was well aware he was in the middle of something cultural where he wasn't really the focus. Like, that film was clearly not made for him. It didn't really speak to him. He didn't wholly object to it and say, that was the worst thing I've ever seen and I can't believe I spent money to see it. He was just aware that movie was made for a certain audience. And so I get back to where I started. If you saw it, did you go to see it because you just thought, hey, Barbie, that's an iconic toy. It's been around since my childhood. I mean, it's been around for decades. It's been around for many kids' childhoods. Now, you could make a clever, creative, interesting-looking storyline out of that toy and never go political, never make some sort of cultural statement. If you wanted to, you could. I don't believe that's what this movie did. And no, I'm not trying to find offense. I'm not saying you shouldn't see it and whatever. Go do what you want to do. I'm just saying let's not pretend when the media is doing backflips and like when the Washington Post sends out an email yesterday saying, oh, Barbie's grossed the biggest box office take. Look out, franchise films. They were basically just salivating that this movie had done as well along with Oppenheimer. They throw Oppenheimer in there, though, and I think they do that to help inflate Barbie, frankly. But they said, oh, look out, Marvel films. Look out, Mission Impossible. Look out, Top Gun, Indiana Jones. Look how well Barbie did. If they're that enthusiastic, and if, in fact, there is politics in the film, well, then that's all you need to know. I heard from lots of people on Oppenheimer that was worth the time and to go see it. But this map they put up, it was really kind of interesting. They said the blue states, believe it or not. It was the blue states who saw Oppenheimer. It was the red states who went to see Barbie. And you know what I'll bet? I'll bet there were a whole lot of conservative parents who took their daughters to see Barbie thinking this was some cute movie about a doll. And from what it's PG-13. I'll bet a lot of parents took their kids. And I don't think it was overt. Don't misunderstand. My head's not on fire about this. I'm just saying I have a funny feeling this movie did as well as it did, particularly in red states, because of a mass marketing push that led people to believe that this was just a benign, fun story movie about a doll. When in fact, yes, it was. It was political, and that's okay. I'm not saying I'm mad about it. I'm just saying when I saw conservatives say, you know what, just lighten up. Not everything has to be politics all the time. Sometimes a movie's just a movie. And I say, yeah, that's true. Sometimes that's true. I don't think that's true here, though. So what do you say about it today? 888-630-9625. 888-630 WMAL. My name's Chris Stigall, in for Vince today. Vince is back tomorrow. You can find my podcast. You can find my Substack, my 3 times a week newsletter. If you want to join me there, it's a lot of fun. We enjoy it there. It's called the Harump Society. Go to chrisstigall.com and you can find it all. Let's go to Pittsburgh. talk to Cindy, who saw both of these, which I also learned, Cindy, is a thing culturally now. I didn't know people do this. Apparently, it's a thing. People go see 2 movies at a time when they go out. Welcome in.
Hello.
Hi, Cindy.
Chris, hi. Okay, so I saw both of them. I don't want to take a lot of time about Oppenheimer. It was great. But everybody is praising it. Okay, then we saw the Barbie movie. And I just did that to please my daughter, who's 27, was dying to see it. And when we got our concessions, I said, do you have a barf bag? Because I think I might need one. Ha ha.
May I ask you something? Let me just quickly ask you. Your 27-year-old daughter, do you think she wanted to see this because of nostalgia, or she thought it genuinely looked interesting, or did you talk that much about why she wanted to see it so much?
We didn't discuss it. But I've got my bullet points here, and I know we don't have a lot of time, so let me cover. I was really surprised. It was deep. It was intellectually deep. There were themes running through it. One was existentialism. Barbie becomes human, and she's grappling with the questions of who am I and why am I here? There was feminism, but it was empowering a women's achievement. And at the same time, it had the message of it's okay to be a mother. It had a theme of the need for respect of both men and women in our social culture. It had generational tension theme between mother and daughter, and that had a very nice resolution. At one point, when Barbie's human, she's sitting on a park bench with an older woman. Barbie looks at her and says, "You're beautiful." And the woman said, "I know." And I just thought that was so uplifting for the older generation of women. Then afterwards, I'm sitting on a bench in the big hallway, and there was a group of about 6 people, men and women, who'd seen it together. They were maybe in their 30s. They looked like career people. The men were like, yeah, well, gaga about the way Margot Robbie looked. And they really didn't get the themes. And the women, I'm not sure, because, in a group like that, you might not want to appear to be smarter than the guys. I don't know. But anyway.
So you think men just didn't pick up on it, on the depth that you've just laid out?
From my observation.
All right. Fair enough. No wrong answers here, Cindy. I didn't see it, so I can't comment, but I'm grateful for your perspective. Thank you for calling. Let's go to Donna in Frederick next. Hey, Donna, I'm glad you called. Chris Stigall in for Vince today. Hi.
Hi, Chris. My pleasure to call in. I've enjoyed the show. I want to start with the movies. I didn't bother to see either one of them because I think the most important movie out there is the Sound of Freedom, which I have yet to go see as well. But that's at the top of my list. And I think the reason why the propaganda is so heavy about the other two is they want to drown out the success of the Sound of Freedom. And then my second point was the lady you had on from Breitbart today. She was great. And one of the things people in this country need to remember is that people like my grandmother who came from overseas to flee from communism and socialism and all the isms that we've been plagued with all these decades, they're the backbone of this country when it comes to the actual fight. And they're the people we have to look to and remember their words, because going forward, that is going to be pivotal. It's going to get rougher before it gets better, for sure.
Thank you, Donna. I appreciate it. Sound of Freedom, by the way, I should mention, came in third this weekend at the box office. And what's remarkable about that movie is that this has been out now for 3 weeks or so, and it continues to hold its own. It already kicked the crap out of the Indiana Jones 4th, 5th installment, whatever that was, and it continues to hang in there, and it doesn't have nearly the budget, the promotion, the marketing. That is just pure viral word of mouth. Now, listen, I don't think... I think people are overthinking hyping up Barbie and Oppenheimer just so that people will stop paying attention to Sound of Freedom. I don't actually think that's true. I think what they're trying to do is say, hey, look, Barbie, look at how well Barbie did. Woke is alive and well That's what I actually think. I think that they're trying to communicate that the country, because remember what they said about Sound of Freedom. Its overwhelming success was dismissed as QAnon. Kooks were watching that. I think they see relief in the Barbie film. All right, the country still is center left. It still can sit and tolerate the politics of progressivism in movies. Whew, we thought for a minute Sound of Freedom was gaining traction out there. But no, it turns out they still have an appetite. Oppenheimer is just a historical film. I don't even think Oppenheimer has anything to do with this, other than it's full of stars and it's a true story. It's a biopic. I want to see that very much. And I don't think that has anything to do with trying to silence Sound of Freedom. Personally, I mean, that's my 2 cents about the thing. But it does speak to how powerful Sound of Freedom is. I mean, every mainstream outlet culturally in the country was rowing in the same direction, trying to get people whipped up about this Barbie movie. And it worked. And the movie looked interesting enough that a lot of people went to see it. But still, even still, Sound of Freedom hung in there at third. And Oppenheimer, which is just a star-studded biopic. I mean, that's hard to compete. I mean, eventually movies were going to come out that people wanted to see besides Sound of Freedom. So I get it. People are very passionate about Sound of Freedom, but I don't think that's the storyline here. William's in Manassas. Hey, William, I'm glad you hung on. I'm Chris in for Vince today. Hi.
Hey, Chris, how you doing?
Doing great, thanks. What's on your mind?
Hello? One of the things I often heard people say is that, all these big, movies and companies that, they went woke and then they went stupid or whatever. But I'm not so sure that's the case.
Well, all right. Duly noted. Quick break for news. Julie Kelly is back. Her comments on Trump's trial date, the first one set, and where she thinks it heads and what it has to do with the J6 folks, which she has covered extensively. That's on the way on WMAL.
Hi, it's Jonathan Cotton with the Good Feet store, and nice weather has finally arrived. That means it's time for flip-flops, sandals, and sneakers. But for some people, it's the season for painful feet. To avoid foot pain, we recommend the right arch supports in your shoes. This is where the Good Feet store comes in. Don't cut corners with your feet this summer or during any season. Our patented 3-step arch support system has helped countless people find relief. Here's another customer sharing their Good Feet story.
After I decided my pain was too much, and my doctor actually suggested that I do visit the Good Feet store. Pretty amazing when they put the arch supports in your shoe and you realize there's not pain, and you think, how can this arch support in my shoe make my back pain go away? But it works. It was incredible.
The Good Feet store has locations in D.C. and Baltimore, and now open in Frederick across from Wegmans. I'm Jonathan Cotton, and we look forward to seeing you soon at the Good Feet store.
I have a new friend and colleague over at Substack. Well, she's an old friend, but a new friend and colleague at Substack, where everybody goes. All the cool kids are going to Substack now. Julie Kelly, ladies and gentlemen, with her brand new Substack project called Declassified with Julie Kelly. If you're not following it, what's wrong with you? Julie, welcome.
Chris, how are you?
I'm great.
Happy summer. Good to talk with you as always.
Yeah, likewise. I love that you're doing the Substack bit. That seems to be, like I said, it's where all the action seems to be from, Alex Berenson was the guy that kind of turned me onto it through the COVID era, and it seems to be where a lot of people are doing great work. I'm glad to see you there.
Well, it's just fun. And, for independent journalists or writers, the new features, new platforms, whether it's Twitter subscriptions, Substack. I imagine there'll be other things. There's locals, which I'm not that familiar with. But there are going to be some cool opportunities for people to maintain their independence, make some money, write whatever content they want, and not be tethered to, one of these older established organizations. So exciting times, I think, for us on the right.
So if people are not familiar with Substack yet, or, by the way, if you want to go click on my website right now, you go to chrisstigall.com and you click on the Harumph Society logo. That'll take you right to Substack. And while you're there, I hope you'll join the Harumph Society. But look for Declassified with Julie Kelly and subscribe to hers too, because
I appreciate that.
You're doing important stuff. I'm largely just playing grab ass, but you
Harumphy.
Yeah.
Harumping.
That's right, harumping. But people are awesome there, and they will love your work, I know, as people do. Twitter and Elon, it's interesting, just this week he's announcing he's changing the whole look of the thing with the X and the black and the whole deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And are you with what Tucker's doing? And apparently he's doing it gratis, from what he says. He's just partnered with him just to kind of go rogue. Fox is suing and trying to stop it. How do you read all this as someone who has been a Tucker guest frequently and done a lot of work for him on subjects like you're writing at Substack?
I mean, I like so many people, miss him. I just miss watching him. While I'm here in Central Time Zone at 7:00. That was sort of your palate cleanser for the day. So I miss that. And the Twitter, what he's doing on Twitter is good. I hope it's just a precursor of bigger things that we know he's planning. I'm not really sure what that is, but of course I do miss that as an outlet for getting January 6th or DOJ corruption overall reporting to other people because he was invaluable in that regard. I mean, nobody had the courage early on to tackle January 6th and expose, what we're learning still here 2.5 years later. So I miss that. I miss him. I text with him occasionally. I don't want to bother him too much, but I'm very excited to see what he's putting together.
I'm trying to figure out, and then I want to get into what you've written, but I'm trying to figure out generally, the diversification of information is a great thing. And I know how much you and I care about that, and Tucker with a new platform. And, people say that his interviews are now garnering tens of millions more views than he ever would have seen on Fox. But at the same time, there's a disconnect. Like you said, you miss him. I do too. I'll confess, I don't watch every post he makes either, right. Whereas I might have on Fox every night as an appointment. It's 7. I'm going to sit down and do it. With so much to consume now, I kind of wonder about the utility of that. Will people know to seek out some things that are important? Does that make sense?
It does. It does make sense. And that's sort of the risk here. I was talking with some friends at a party over the weekend. He was a little bit older gentleman. And he said to me, I went into depression after they took Tucker off the air. And I know he's doing stuff on Twitter, but I'm not on Twitter. Mm-hmm. So you have that older generation, even some that they're not on Twitter. They don't want to be on Twitter. They can't figure it out if they are. And so, that's a little bit of a loss. Now, the flip side is he's obviously reaching a bigger audience and people who wouldn't tune into Fox. So, it could cut both ways. But yes, there could be an oversaturation, which is why, Chris, I think it's important for people to kind of stay in their lane.
Yes.
I'm not going to be competing with rock stars like Miranda Devine on the Hunter Biden thing. So people don't want to be reading the same thing about the Hunter and Joe Biden scandal that they see, 100 times a day on Twitter. So I think the challenge is for anyone who wants to pursue that is to stay in their lane, cultivate a niche and just focus on that. And I think that's why people, come to me for January 6th or classified documents, which I know we'll talk about, but Jack Smith's investigation overall into Donald Trump and his associates and his lawyers and his White House aides. And of course, as we know, his supporters, more than 1,000 of whom have been arrested for any participation in the events of January 6th. So I think that's the challenge for independent journalists at this point.
It's great advice, and you have your niche, your lane. It's funny, as we've talked over the, last couple of years now, has become January 6th, and I vividly kind of remember you sort of standing up and raising your hand going, this concerns me. Hey, this concerns me, to now becoming the authority on it. I mean, it's quite a trajectory for you. I don't... Do you even know how it happened? I mean, you have become the destination on it now.
It's just mind-blowing when I look back. My daughter, on the 2-year anniversary, she said, something January 6th. She goes, oh, my God, Mom, January 6th today, 2 years ago. I said, I know. How did this happen to me? Like, how did I don't know, but never did I think when I started covering the plight of the political prisoners, people who were being detained, held in custody, denied bail on nonviolent charges, and seeing where that was headed, did I think we would be sitting here with, already one criminal indictment against Donald Trump out of Jack Smith's office and awaiting what will be a multi-count felony criminal indictment for the events of January 6th. I wasn't expecting that early on. As DOJ's investigation progressed, though, it became very clear that that's where that was headed. And, Chris, here we are. We know it's only a matter of time before he is indicted for January 6th and others, not just him, but others as well.
Yeah, and this second indictment that's coming from Jack Smith related to January 6th and the hearings, they say that this is the one, and I think you even told me, of the indictments that may come, this is the one that everyone's most concerned about for him because it's D.C., and that's just a cesspool. There's not a shot in hell he gets a fair hearing in D.C. I believe you and I have even talked about that before. So let's take these in order, though, because we could go all kinds of places, but you have written specifically at Substack, at Declassified with Julie Kelly on Substack. Judge sets Trump's classified docs trial date. Now what? This was something, I think the last time you and I talked, we talked about this judge and wondering exactly how she'd behave, this Eileen Cannon. You were kind of excited to see that it fell in her lap. Others had said, well, I don't know, be careful, because she may feel now beholden to the left to, be fair. And so as such, she split the baby here, and she set the trial date for May. Not as early as Jack Smith wanted, not as late as Trump's team wanted. How do you read it?
Well, I feel a little bit exonerated about my analysis of Judge Cannon. As you know, I followed the special master lawsuit. So last year, Donald Trump filed a lawsuit in her court and landed in her courtroom, seeking the special master, a third party basically, who would handle all of the evidence seized in the Mar-a-Lago raid last August. So DOJ, Jay Bratt, the counterintelligence chief, who was just with Maine DOJ at the time and now has been assigned to Jack Smith's team, I followed all of those proceedings and hearings that she had and all the motions flying back and forth. And I will tell you, she has DOJ's number. She is no fool. She's actually exceptionally smart. And so she did appoint a special master. And one of the reasons was because it's this unprecedented raid. Donald Trump is not a normal private citizen. He is a former president, and the case should be handled that way. You have the DOJ, the individual who won the presidency, won in scare quotes, now investigating his predecessor and potential rival. So she understood the political nature of the case, but she also upbraided Jay Bratt and DOJ for two things, Chris. Number one, leaks to the media. She confronted Jay Bratt directly in a court hearing last September. And he said, oh, we know, I don't think they're coming out of our office, but leaks do happen. Oh, well. And also the mishandling of some of the evidence early on. They had to admit that the FBI, the filter team, had passed along privileged communications to the investigative team, which is a big no-no. And she also criticized DOJ for that and said, well, you admitted it, but we don't know where those documents are, and we don't know what safeguards you've put in place yet to stop that from happening. She is very skeptical of this DOJ and Jay Bratt in particular. And now he's handling this classified documents case. And she was pretty tough on him in the hearing last week. And this was a motions hearing to continue the trial because both DOJ, Jack Smith's team, and Donald Trump's defense attorneys have competing motions about when the trial date should be set. But she is not tolerating any games. Now, I'll tell you something. One of the corporate media's January 6th reporters who I think was there, said he was impressed with her at a level he was not expecting. And I could say, reading the court here, that I got the transcript. She is no nonsense. She is extremely smart. She understands what's at stake here. She denied DOJ's motion She accused them filing at the last minute without conferring with defense. She also criticized them publicly for that. This extensive protective order that Chris would prevent Donald Trump from seeing some of the alleged documents that they took from him when he was as a former president. Think about that. So they're trying to treat now Donald Trump. The entire investigation was premised on the Presidential Records Act, correct?
Yep.
Now they say that's irrelevant. They say that Donald Trump should be treated as a private citizen, and they want to keep away from him alleged classified documents they took from Mar-a-Lago that now he can't see. This is the craziness. So she was very wary about that as well. So to your point, she did set this May 2024 trial date. I don't think it's going to stick. And I think one reason she did is to force DOJ to adhere to all these various deadlines with this special guidance related to classified documents investigations.
Which brings me to the letter that Trump very publicly announced last week. Hey, I got this letter on a Sunday from Jack Smith. They're going to come at me again, this time for January 6th in Washington, D.C. I wondered if it was because they had such a rough go of it before Judge Cannon. Where they were like, here's another log on the fire, then let's pivot and go this way, you think? Or this was coming anyway?
Yes, this was definitely coming anyway. And it will be interesting to see how that plays into this May 2024 trial date. Because as Trump's lawyer said, he already has a few trial dates pending.
Manhattan also, yeah.
Two in New York, actually. And of course, we know that the Georgia Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis is planning to indict him next month as well. There are reports that Jack Smith is working with Fani Willis for this January 6th indictment. And this is the fraudulent elector scheme, which was nothing more than a publicity stunt, but is also being criminalized. So there's a lot of things happening. But back to your point that you said about Washington, D.C., and why the January 6th criminal indictment against Trump and others is so dangerous is because it's handled in the D.C. courthouse. So you have a grand jury made up of voters in a city that voted 93% for Joe Biden, that have open contempt for Donald Trump and all of his supporters. You have DOJ with a near perfect conviction rate in all of these January 6 cases. You had the chief judge up until I think she was done in March, Beryl Howell, an Obama-appointed judge who has been the chief judge for 7 years. She oversaw special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation. She has allowed DOJ and then Jack Smith to run roughshod over the process. She's the one, Chris. This probably would not have happened in Florida, which is why they conducted the entire investigation in Washington, D.C., Chris. The classified documents investigation took place in Washington, D.C., which is a problem because the alleged crime happened in Palm Beach, Florida, which is why Jack Smith, at the very last minute, switched venues, went to the grand jury, basically read the grand jury transcripts or a summary of what happened in the D.C. grand jury to a Florida grand jury. That's how they got the indictment. That's how dirty and sneaky these people are. And I will actually be surprised if Judge Cannon lets Jack Smith's team get away with it, because it sounds like Trump's defense counsel is going to come back and say that Jack Smith abused the grand jury process. None of this should have taken place in D.C. It all should have happened in Florida. So we'll see how that goes. If Judge Howell had not pierced attorney-client privilege between Donald Trump and Evan Corcoran, his attorney, she cited a crime fraud exception, and they got his testimony and they got his documents. And that was the key to this classified documents case. Probably would not have happened anywhere except Washington, D.C.
Julie Kelly, given the coverage that you have done with the January 6th defendants, I would assume you're the least optimistic or most pessimistic, however you want to frame it, for Trump and the outcome. If you're looking at Manhattan, if you're looking at Florida, if you're looking at Fulton County, Georgia, it's D.C. that probably keeps you up at night for what Trump may be walking into there. I mean, because as you've just laid out, there's not a shot in hell he gets a fair hearing.
There's not a shot in hell. And it doesn't matter what judge this is assigned to. His appointed judges have behaved as badly, if not worse, than the Democratic appointed judges. Keep in mind, judges in this case have denied every single change of venue motion for these January 6 defendants, including high-profile defendants in the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers trials. They have let DOJ get away with whatever they wanted. The evidence presented in these cases are laughable. They are text messages, group text messages, they're little videos, they're memes that have been posted on social media. You have 10 men now convicted of seditious conspiracy who did nothing more than go into the Capitol. Some of them were kind of loudmouths before and on January 6th. They had no weapons. One of them wasn't even there. Enrique Terrio, the head of the Proud Boys, they brought no weapons. They did not assault police officers. One or two were charged with vandalizing the building. And they're convicted of seditious conspiracy.
Yeah, Julie, it's stunning, and you're going to be covering this. You've been covering this better than anybody else out there, and now so happy to see you at Substack. It's called Declassified with Julie Kelly. Julie, great to see you again. Come back and talk with us. Chris Stigall in for Vince Coglianese today at 5:53.